Hi everyone, my name is Nick, and as much as I would love to be hiding my baby face from the camera this week while my facial hair regrows, I simply cannot afford it. So this week we're going to be talking about some underrated houseplants, my 2022 picks for houseplants you should be paying more attention to. So without missing a beat, let's just get right into this. So the first group of plants I'm going to talk about today is asparagus plants, asparagus ferns, whatever you want to call it. These plants are very closely related to asparagus that we eat, hence why they are called asparagus ferns. The fern part comes from them looking more visually like ferns. But this is a group of plants that I found was not one that was a hot seller back when I worked at the houseplant store, although that's been over a year ago at this point, so who knows what's popular at this point, truly. But this is one that I really think is just kind of like one of the unsung heroes of the houseplant world, where it just has such a fun vibe. Like, you can't knock this at all. This is so fun. It's not necessarily like a focal piece. It's not, I'm sure there's focal piece specimens of these, but in my experience, these aren't things that you're just kind of having like a one and done kind of thing. It's kind of like a little like wispy inclusion into a little plant display that I kind of enjoy the character that it has. So it's got these little like more frilly bits. It's got these more like thicker bits right here. I'm sure this was depending on maybe I was giving the plant more sunlight when it was putting off this foliage, but maybe I was giving it less sunlight with this foliage. So as far as like ferns go, they're not supposed to get like a lot of sunlight, but asparagus can really take a beating from the sunlight. I've grown these in like west and south facing windows and they've performed very, very well. I've also grown them in like east to north facing windows and they've done fine. I've grown them away from the windows and they've done fine. It's just they grow definitely more vigorously in higher light conditions, and they also become a little bit more chlorotic, like they're a little bit more yellow-green in color. I've pulled mine away a little bit from the window over the past couple months. You can see it's kind of coming in a little bit more green, which I appreciate a little bit more, but any green's fantastic. This is an Asparagus RETROFRACTUS, so this is just one of many different kinds of asparagus that are on the market. One that's a little bit more prevalent, I would say. My specimen is very small because I just cut it back recently, so it's just regrowing. But this is an asparagus. I totally forgot the name of it. Maybe, is this asparagus retrofractus? No, this is asparagus. Oh, it doesn't matter. I'll put it on screen. But this is the more like common asparagus plant that you're going to see if you walk into a houseplant store and you ask for an asparagus fern. They are normally much more fuller than this. As you can see, I recently cut it back where there's all these little stalks right here, and now they're just growing off here. Here's a little bit more new growth coming off here. But they kind of grow up and they kind of lay flat, as you can see, like this. And as it forms like a nice bush of a plant, it's just got this kind of like very like evergreeny appearance, very, very lush, very bohemian. So really excellent houseplant if you're looking for something that's got a little bit less tropical vibes, a little bit more relaxed vibes, or more like woodlandy. Asparagus ferns are fantastic. And there's more than just these two varieties. And they're very inexpensive. And they're a lot easier than ferns, in my experience. So another group of plants that I think kind of falls under the radar, not as much as asparagus, but still as a whole, I would say is begonia. So this is just one example I have here of kind of a more, I don't want to call this underwhelming in terms of foliage, because this foliage is very, very enigmatic and nuanced, as you can see with how much character it has. But there's a lot of begonias. If you walk into your local houseplant stores or your grocery stores, I'm sure they're going to have a plethora of Rex begonias, which you'll see in like every color of the rainbow with some incredible designs, but they're not the easiest begonias out there. In my experience, they're ones that just kind of are much more finicky. They really do require higher humidity and more attention when it comes to the watering. So not my cup of tea when it comes to begonias, but I've been kind of branching out into some other begonias. In fact, every time I've done like an unboxing from Steve's Leaves, if you guys are familiar with them or have watched my Steve's Leaves unboxings, I feel like I always end up getting another begonia in my collection, and I'm like half the time like, oh crap, like I might kill this begonia, as I have on several occasions. But more recently, the begonias that I've been adding to my collection from them have been quite incredible and performing very well, which Steve's Leaves is like an incredible purveyor of begonias. In fact, that's what they are known for growing, I believe. So if you are interested in begonias, definitely a great place to check out. But look at this foliage. You can see it's plain green, but it's got this kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, just kind of like corrugated-ish foliage that's got kind of like this like red, like undertone to it. It's quite phenomenal. Really an excellent begonia. This one is Begonia NATUNAENSIS. If I didn't say, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But there are so many begonias out there. In fact, I'll share a couple other ones with you guys. So one that has a little bit more color. This one's newer to me as well, also from Steve's Leaves. All the begonias in my home, I'm pretty sure, are from Steve's Leaves. So this is a Begonia Imperialis Silver Band, is what the tag says. You can see some of the new growth on mine has been coming in kind of like, it looks like it's gotten eaten by something. It's probably just because this has been growing in a greenhouse in prime conditions and I brought it into my home. And the NATUNAENSIS, for example, I put it inside like a plastic bag, basically to like recreate the greenhouse conditions. So that's why this one looks so phenomenal. Now I'm growing it outside. I think it's acclimated to my home well enough. This one I kind of just thrust it into my home's conditions. And you can see that it's kind of suffered a little bit in that sense. But besides that, I think it's performing totally fine. It's growing new leaves. I'm sure once it acclimates to my home or when like the spring or summertime comes around, I think that's when it's probably going to start looking better a little bit more visually with those leaves. But a really fun begonia, a little bit more reminiscent of those Rex begonias that I was referring to, but it's just got a little bit more character. I love the leaf shape with the band, of course, that goes on the center. And the underside of the leaves has got that red color, so you guys know I'm a sucker for that. And I should show you guys one more begonia because there's one right behind me here, I believe, that is quite different from both of these, just to give you a really wide array of just sheer variety that you're going to find within begonias. So this is a Begonia polygonoides, once again from Steve's Leaves. I love this one because this really reads more like a Hoya or like an Asparagus kind of deal to me. Definitely not like the other begonias that I'm used to seeing. So I really appreciate this one. This is much more of a trailing variety of begonia. You can see the way it's starting to creep off the edge here. Eventually, as these get too heavy, they will trail down similar to like a pothos or a Hoya. And then it's going to just really be a wonderful specimen in my home. So a lot different, and you can see how full these begonias are from Steve's Leaves, even if they just come in these tiny pots here. And what I love about begonias is they're very inexpensive. I'd say 9 times out of 10, a begonia you're going to purchase, even if it's like a collector variety, is going to cost less than $30. So I can't complain about that, knowing the way that a lot of plants have been getting a little bit more expensive these days, particularly like philodendrons, monsteras, and Hoyas. Speaking of Hoyas, I'm going to talk about one Hoya today. So in this video, I'm primarily touching on like groups of plants or genera of plants that I think are very underrated. But Hoya as a whole have been kind of, you know, skyrocketing up there in popularity, and the price tags have been following. People are really interested in getting those out there fun Hoyas, which obviously I totally understand. I collect Hoya. They're a lot of fun to collect. But I do think that the plain old Hoya carnosa, which I'm sorry I just called you plain old because there is nothing plain and old about this, although it is, I guess in a sense, just a green Hoya. But this is truly just such an underrated Hoya. Back when I worked at the houseplant store and people asked if I had any Hoya in stock, they were like disappointed when they heard I just had plain green Hoya carnosa, which this is just, look at this. Look how cute this is in a little planter that I made. You put it in a nice colorful ceramic planter. I guess this one kind of lacks color, but it's more my color scheme. You get what I'm saying. And it just shines like a star. I have this on one of my bookcases and it just spills out and I absolutely love it. And if I'm not careful or not paying enough attention, these vines will start to grab onto things. So gotta be a little bit more mindful there, or I might go to water it one day and it might pull something else off with it, which I've had happen with my cissus right next to it. So I've been extra careful. Cissus are also underrated houseplants, but I feel like I've talked about them like every single underrated plants that deserve more attention videos I've ever done here on YouTube. So I'm not talking about them today. I'm going to spare you, but Hoya carnosa, just plain old Hoya carnosa, is an excellent option. Like, don't be passing this up, especially if you grow Hoya in your home. If you collect Hoya and you don't have a plain green Hoya carnosa, I'm questioning your credibility. I'll come out here and say it. I will. One that kind of is similar in care to the Hoya, but definitely way more underrated, is Rhipsalis. So this one right here is just a really funky one that I feel like I've never talked about here on YouTube, really. This is a Rhipsalis ewaldiana, a little bit more of a succulent one, but it still has kind of that like characteristics of like that weird twisted succulent foliage, kind of similar to like the Rhipsalis paradoxa, if you are familiar with Rhipsalis. The Rhipsalis paradoxa is probably like the most popular, like overrated Rhipsalis, which, I mean, overrated, yes, but like still an excellent houseplant. Not knocking Rhipsalis paradoxa by any means. This is just one that's a little bit more out there. I will say though with these that the prices can be like all over the place. Back when I was a buyer, if I was buying in like 6 or 8 inch hanging baskets of these plants, the prices were ridiculous wholesale. Like I would have to end up retailing a 6 inch hanging basket, let's say, for like $60 to $85 depending on what it was. Like, it's crazy. However, if I was just getting just a random old like assortment of 4-inch cacti and succulents, sometimes like a quarter of the assortment would be Rhipsalis and they would be just the same price as everything else, dirt cheap. So keep an eye out, check the cactus and succulents assortment selection at your local houseplant stores before you go purchasing a large hanging basket, which can be tempting because those hanging baskets did look pretty nice, I will say. But I think it's a plant that's perfectly suited to start off small. It won't have that full like waterfall effect that you might get with a full hanging basket, but I would say in due time you might get it. In fact, I really appreciate the funky way that these things grow. Sometimes they'll just kind of like put off a bunch of growth at once, as you can see like on the ends here, but sometimes they put up these like long shoots that they stick all the new growth off of, if you can kind of see where all of the new growth is coming off of this, just like one stick here. So they grow in really funky ways. I'm not sure if this has anything to do with like lack of fertilization or not enough sunlight or water, or if this is the correct way to grow. I'm not too familiar with this one in particular. I've had some other grow in a similar manner like that, like Rhipsalis remulosa, which I guess is technically not a Rhipsalis. But anyway, I'm getting off topic, which is probably a sign that I should move on to another one. So, oh, this is totally a very underrated houseplant. I just talked about it in a recent video though, so forgive me. This is my Siderasis FUSCATA, and this is a spiderwort. This is very closely related to Tradescantias, the inch plant, Calicias, which are like the smaller versions of the inch plant. There's plenty of different genera of spiderworts that you're going to see on the market. This is just one that is a little bit less common, but it's not worth any more money by any means. It's still a very inexpensive houseplant. This one I also got from Steve's Leaves. And this is just such a stunner. You can see in the leaves how it is like very closely visually, if you like look really hard, if you squint really hard, how it's like kind of like an inch plant, but at the same time the leaves are wildly different. It's just in the like overall like stature of this plant you can tell. But then it grows in like this more of a rosette pattern, like similar to an aloe or a sansevieria. I am interested to see how this grows over time because I've only been growing this thing in my home for like 6 to 8 months at this point, so only time will tell, but it's really just been such an incredible houseplant. I love the foliage, how it has that little silver streak down the center, and then it's got these like thick layer of fuzz over the leaves that I don't know if you can even see, but it's like a crimson reddish color. It really is just stunning. And then the back sides of the leaves have like this purple color, but it's also like super splotchy. There's just a whole bunch of things that I love about this houseplant. And just the fact that it's a spiderwort is even cooler because spiderworts are just like, you know, very underrated houseplants as a whole, although not all of them are the easiest ones. Like I don't have an inch plant in my home to this day because, you know, they grow well for like 6 months and then they get all leggy and then you gotta cut them back, and it's a whole thing that I'm not willing to do. But I just really like how this is a spiderwort. It's an underrated spiderwort, one that's way lesser known. But speaking of which, actually, speaking of like 2022, I guess we just started, I've been seeing recently this houseplant pop up, which is super, super cool, but just want to remind you guys that it's just a spiderwort. That Gigananthus plant, have you guys seen that? It's like gothic black, like stark black. It's super, super cool, but I have been seeing the price all over the place because it's a new houseplant. There's definitely some companies who are trying to get a pretty penny from it, but just remember, everybody, it's very closely related to an inch plant, and how much would you pay for an inch plant? No more than like $15, so keep that in mind, please. Thank you very much. Okay, stepping off my soapbox. Okay, let's see, what else do I have to talk about? I think I have 2 more different groups of plants to talk about today. This one I feel like is going to look really underwhelming, but this is another one of those unsung heroes of the houseplant world. So this little thingy right here, this is an Aspidistra. Its common name is a cast iron plant. This is a tiny, tiny little one. I have a much bigger one that I keep on the floor in my kitchen that's just too big for me to talk about today. So this is my example today. But cast iron plants are just like the most ridiculous, easy houseplants. The only thing about them is they can be very expensive. It depends on where you buy it. If you buy it for houseplant purposes, like a full like 10-inch pot of cast iron plant, that thing is going to be expensive, like $100 to $150 expensive if you're lucky. If you're really lucky, you can probably find it for like between 50 and 100. And if you've hit the lottery, you'll find it for less than that. But they are also sold for like landscape purposes, and that's when you're often going to be finding it sold for much less money. I don't understand how that works out, but just something to bear in mind there. But this is just a teeny tiny example, but what I love about cast iron plants is just how unkillable they are. They're called cast iron plants, for God's sakes. Like, it's right in the name. It was a plant that I'm pretty sure was like gained notoriety because it would survive like the cold Victorian winters in England back in whenever that was. So it's just really survived through some really harsh times. And I can say that statement holds up because mine that I keep in my kitchen, I barely pay any attention to. It barely gets any sunlight, and it just keeps on putting out new growth and looking fantastic. The one I have in my kitchen is a Milky Way variety, or it might be something different, but that's what it's known as on the market. It's got some white spots in the leaves. I'll put some footage on screen for you to see because it is quite a lovely plant. But the thing that I love about cast iron plants is they're also pet friendly or non-toxic, which you're not normally going to see many floor plants. I should do a video on that, but you're not going to see many floor plants that are pet friendly. There's a very slim pickings when it comes to that. So cast iron plant's an excellent one, and as I kind of touched on with the name suggesting that it's just tough as nails, it can survive like very harsh periods of drought. They do not need much sunlight whatsoever. Of course, as any houseplant goes, it will grow better if you remember to water it and if you give it a little bit more sunlight. But like I said, it holds through. I can swear by it not requiring that much sunlight or water whatsoever. I probably throw mine in the shower like once a month and hope for the best. But this is just a little teeny tiny plain green one right here. I got this one from like Glass Houseworks or something. So this will never be like a full specimen, but I just wanted it to be this cute little couple leaves coming out of a little planter here, and I can just stick it wherever because it's a cast iron plant. So definitely a really excellent houseplant that I feel like a lot of people don't grow. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about Dracaenas. I'm specifically talking about like the leafy Dracaenas. I know now Sansevierias are technically Dracaenas, but Sansevierias are, they're not overrated. They're just right in the golden spot. You know what I mean? But Dracaenas, I feel like, get a little bit less love. I feel like they're just kind of like deemed as like the houseplant that people have growing at work and stuff, which, I mean, not wrong, but this is my Dracaena REFLEXA. This is one that I get really excited about. It's got a little bit more of a different vibe than many of the other Dracaenas, which I love all Dracaenas, not knocking any. Like I have my big golden coast right outside my bedroom here. That's like a focal piece in my home. I also have my Janet Craig that I keep over by my mirror, and I feel like that's like a total like bohemian vibe kind of houseplant. Also probably the one that's most commonly in offices. But this Dracaena REFLEXA is a little bit more, has a little bit more character. It's really dusty too. Oh gosh, I've been keeping this one over by my front door. So if you watch my apartment tour, there's like barely any sunlight over there. And this thing has been, it's put up at least a couple of leaves for me since there. If I have my bedroom door open, you can't see it, it doesn't matter, but it gets like a lick of sunlight. Anyway, this plant is just another one that's tough as nails. I really love the character. As you can see, it's got this thin little stalk right here, which most Dracaenas, you're probably used to them having a much like thicker stalk that's just like the main stem coming up before there's like a whole hunk of tree. This is more of a, you know, it's just growing up the whole way. I just have this as one little just funky specimen plant in here, but you can often find these sold in like an 8 or 10 inch pot, and they might already be like a waist or shoulder height. You can even find them like specimen houseplants in like 14-inch pots that are just like taller than me and you, and just like branches every which way. Total focal piece, incredible houseplant, one that you could spend the money on and know that you have a reliable houseplant versus when you spend that same amount of money on a specimen fiddly fig tree and it loses all of its leaves, or any ficus for that matter, and they lose all of their leaves, and then you're stuck with this tree that has a lot of character, perhaps a little too much and a little too few leaves. Dracaena REFLEXA is the exact opposite. So definitely an incredible option if you're looking for a little bit more of an interesting Dracaena for your home. But I mean, I'm sure all of you are familiar with Dracaenas. I'm just reminding you about them, so I won't go on about it for too much, but they're just such incredible houseplants that you can put them in the darker corners of your home. They're definitely one of the more foliage houseplants that can handle the darker corners. And as far as watering goes, I don't even know when I water my Dracaenas. My big ones, I probably throw them in the shower like every 6 weeks. Oh my God, that sounds like it's not good, but that's what I've been doing. And this one, I just give a drink every now and again. The root is starting to bust out of the bottom of the planter, as you can see here, so I should probably consider repotting this in the near future. I'll probably go ahead and wait till spring, but Dracaenas are another one of those plants like pothos and ZZ plants and snake plants that you can repot them whenever you want. It's not like a begonia or a prayer plant where if you repot them in the middle of the winter, you might be kissing death. But this thing could be repotted whenever, and it wouldn't be a big deal at all. So that's gonna do it for today's video. Underrated houseplants, my picks for 2022. I know I've done this video in the past, but I tried to pick at least mostly different plants. Sometimes they're too tried and true, you know what I mean? And they're just too underrated. I gotta talk about them again. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at Philly Foliage, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.